we've been trying a lot of piecemeal things over the years. The Springs Initiative and the task force report that Dana just talked about is the most holistic plan we've had for springs restoration. 16 years ago. And it was actually, by the time, before the task force was disbanded, they had come out with additional drafts, 2006 and 2007 of that plan, that were exactly what we need now. And that was over 10 years ago. And so we need to do this again, but we need to do it with the public behind it to help our most conscientious state agency employees, to help them do their jobs and to help them do it right and to help them do it within our lifetime. So that's what I'm hoping we come out of this conference. And I'm going to talk more about that right now, but a little bit more tomorrow. So we got a whole day of talking about solutions, I think, tomorrow, and I hope you'll participate in that if you can. I have just a few slides again. I started again. I was personally involved in the last round of funding from the Springs Initiative. The state decided to go, well, we can't do everything, so we're going to go to 3 of our biggest and most important springs, and we're going to do detailed restoration plans for those springs. And those were Ocala, Itchitucknee, and Silver. And they went out and selected consultants to work on those. And a company that I own and worked in for many years as well in Solutions, we did a lot of our springs work through that company, and we got one of those jobs, the Ocala Springs job. So I basically took over from Jim Stevenson as the working group leader for Ocala Springs for about a year and a half. And we were making great roads. All 3 of those springs got draft restoration plans that came out of that. And the idea, I think, from DEP was that those plans would then stand in as the first draft of BMAPs, Basin Management Action Plans, for those springs. So all 3 springs were done through the first year, and then Governor Scott's new Secretary of DEP canceled the whole project. And in 2000, the Springs Initiative officially went away in May of 2011, and all those contracts were stopped right in the first year out of a 3-year contract, and so those plans just went idle. And so I started the Springs Institute in 2010, and I decided to finish all those plans. So that was the first thing the Springs Institute did, prepare these plans, including several others. We've done 8 detailed restoration plans since then, and these are 3 of them. We prepared executive summaries. You see them on the tables outside that are a condensed version of the plans, but they're 100-page plans for all these. And those have been useful for some of the advocacy groups in terms of moving forward with their own interests in individual springs. I'm getting tired of doing those. We've completed several more. We're in the process of completing one for Wekiva River right now, and a lot of springs around Wekiva. And we're planning to do one on Volusia Blue later this year and next year, and one on the Middle Swanee River. But those are going to be, I think, going to be the end of the individual restoration plans that the Springs Institute does. What I want to start on is holistic plans, a holistic plan for the whole Florida aquifer, for all the springs in the Florida aquifer. And that's what I'm looking for, that's what we're looking for in terms of feedback from the speakers and the audience here today. So I just want to show you the things that I think will go into that plan, and I think we've already seen a lot of these items. So a typical plan was a Silver Springs restoration plan. There's we pull in all the historic data related to the hydrogeology, the hydrology, the climatology, the water quality, the biology. We try to encapsulate all that in a convenient summary. And of course, you've got to look at the whole spring shed to protect the spring. You can't protect the spring by buying the spring. And you've heard that repeatedly today. And then we quantify those threats, those things that were resulting in degradation of the spring. We also quantify as best we could if there were any data available, and there were a lot of data for silver, the biological effects, the ecological effects of rising nitrogen levels, increasing flows. And then we tried to develop a roadmap, and they're pretty simplistic roadmaps, because I knew that I couldn't go out and tell all these local governments they had to do something, or the legislature to do something. But what I could tell them was how much of something they had to do. And so we developed guidance And we've done that now for many different springs, and we're doing more. And this is just the general findings so far of the two major recommendations that are in these plans. Different levels of effort depending on which spring, because some springs are much more affected by agriculture than others, some are more affected by urban impacts. They have different sized flows and different sized problems. But one of the main things that we found is we're going to have to reduce groundwater pumping by over half of what we're currently doing to recover these springs. We talked about a 15% level reduction in the habitat of springs. That's what the agencies have been using. And a lot of scientists don't agree with that number at all. That was a number pulled out of the air on an early SWIFMUD, or Southwest Florida Water Management District, MFL. It had nothing to do with springs. That number has been repeated over and over again between them and the Swanee River District, and probably be replicated again in the Northwest District, MFLs. I don't know yet. We haven't had any. St. John's has their own methods, but that's a number that's really a horrific change in a water body that's an outstanding Florida water that has, is one of the most endangered habitats in Florida. And when we're talking about springs, we're talking about a habitat that's just, a fraction of a % of our sand hills in the state, which we know are endangered habitats. Our springs in the whole state of Florida, there's probably less than 10 or 20,000 acres of springs, spring runs. They're the most limited habitat, and yet they're one of our most unique habitats. So they deserve a higher level of protection. And in consultation with EPA and other groups throughout the Southeast that are looking at flow requirements in these most endangered systems, EPA suggests 5% allowable change rather than 15%. And so that's 5 to 10%. I think we're actually seeing that in the new MFLs that are being done for springs. And to do that, we're going to have a greater than a 50% reduction in groundwater pumping, which is over 1 billion gallons a day. We're pumping in Florida, from Florida to Aquifer, about 2.5 billion gallons a day of water right now. We're going to have to reduce that by over 1 billion gallons a day if we want these spring flows to recover, based on the best hydrogeology I can find. And to do that, we talked about it, Dr. Ulanowitz talked about it today, we need to put a price on water. It's just not going to happen unless there's a price on water. And I think that's something that the general public can get behind, because most of the general public is already paying for their water. In fact, somebody mentioned to me today on the panel up here, they're not paying for the water, they're paying for the delivery of the water. That's what they're paying for. There needs to be a price on the water itself. We're giving it away to many uses that are ineffective, inefficient, or just for profit and not in the public's best interest. And I think we can cut back on our water use that much and replace essential uses with surface waters. And I've discussed that in great depth in other things in my book. And we need to meter all groundwater uses so that everybody's involved in it. So there can't be, there was an attempt to put a price on water back during the Martinez administration. Anybody figure out what year that was? 1980s, I think. Is that how long ago? 1990. Actually, they did a study in what would be the effect of putting a price on groundwater in Florida, and it was not significant. It wasn't going to hurt the economy one little bit. But what we heard from President Haskell was agriculture just came out totally against it. We're not going to do this. We don't like it. And because ag's a very big water user, and they have a very relatively small profit margin, put a price on water, it's going to hurt conventional agriculture. So that's a big opposition. But once again, there's a lot more people in Florida than there is on farms in Florida. So the reality of Florida, there's maybe 1 million or so people on agricultural lands, but there's 19 million other people, and many of whom are paying for water already and understand the need to pay for water. So that's one of the things that we need to do. And there's other ways. We can save 1/4 of our water use right now just by stopping outside irrigation. I mean, that is an unessential water use in a state that gets an average of 52 to 62 inches of rain a year. And the other thing is, you go through the DEP B-maps right now, and you'll see Silver, 79% nitrogen loads. Santa Fe, about 50% nitrogen load reduction. Swanee River, a 90% load reduction. Rainbow, 82% load reduction. Those are the kind of load reductions we need in nitrogen to meet the state's numeric standard for springs. And that's a lot of fertilizer, folks. But that's the only way to achieve it. And we're actually having very frank discussions right now with DEP, Tom Crick and other members of DEP about this right now. What will it really take? And it's going to take a big reduction in the amount of nitrogen we put on the ground in our vulnerable areas. So these are the kind of things that need to go in a comprehensive restoration plan. If you go back to the plans put together by the Springs Task Force in 2006 and 7, which were buried, they never went public because they were controversial. They basically called for these types of changes. We're going to have to reduce groundwater pumping. We're going to have to reduce fertilizer use. And we know what happens sometimes when you speak out too plainly in a politically charged environment. So what this comprehensive plan is going to do is going to look comprehensively at the springs. As I think Todd showed a really good Springs Basin map today. All of North Florida has a spring shed. All of it. There's no, we don't need, there are differences in the amount of protection that different parts of North Florida needs based on confinement of the aquifer and vulnerability of the aquifer. We have good maps of that produced by our state government. But it's all a spring shed, and the water, all the recharge, even though the recharge is lots lower in some areas, like in Jacksonville and northeast Florida, there's still recharge going on, and it's part of the whole water balance for our springs. And so what we've tried to do is draw all those spring sheds, have them as priority focus areas, and that's what I've been doing on individual restoration plans. But I think what the most cost-effective thing for our state to do in terms of developing MFLs in the future, and I'm glad that water management districts are still here, still represented, 3 of them, is to do an overall water balance for the Florida aquifer, determine how much water we need to leave it. And let's do that water balance and not rely on flawed models and come up with how much water humans can use. And I asked the speakers from the water management districts today to give me some estimate of what the sustainable water use would be in their district, but that's something they've never been allowed to do. They've never been allowed to do it. It's what we need to do. We need to set a cap on water use. And that's what will be in this overall plan that I plan to work with the districts on. I hope we all work together on this, all the groups, but it's going to take the public pushing hard to make such a plan.